Finding the right management consultant is difficult. If you have watched the globally famous TV show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You will have known what the 3 lifelines are in this game. It is not much different in a business context. When companies are looking for the right management consultant to help them with business-critical projects, they typically go through a fairly set pattern. This pattern is akin to going through the 3 lifelines mentioned above. In this article I trace the typical pattern using the case example of one company. The patterns might vary slightly, but if you are not careful, and recognize the pattern early enough, you are bound to repeat at least some of the mistakes this company made. Choosing a management consultant is almost as important as choosing a heart surgeon. Here is the story, excerpted from my 2015 book Unchain Your Corporation. I have simplified it a bit to make it shorter. Rob knew his company was in trouble and it had been brewing for a while. In retrospect, their problems appear easy to discern now. However, at that point in time, it was really a very confused mess in their company. Rather than describe the confused thinking across the ranks, let me, at the outset, tell you the real problem they faced. Over the decades, the company had configured their entire sales and marketing effort around selling to end users in a multitude, hundreds, of sites wherever their product was being used. However, with modern management techniques, most of their customers had changed the buying methods. They had now centralizing procurement and purchasing. As a result, a new kind of buying organization had emerged within the customers' companies which wanted to consolidate the entire purchasing and used volume as a leverage to drive down prices. This central buying authority did not care about all the ancillary services delivered to the end users by Rob's company. In the eyes of the centralized purchasers, the users were meant to be experts in using the product and should not need any additional handholding or service worth paying for. However, Rob's company had built its entire supply chain and a sales force on the assumption that the current site-based purchasing and consumption methods would continue indefinitely. Nobody in his company was aware of how massive a change had occurred in the customer space. Hence, his company was over-servicing the key large customers and losing money quarter after quarter for the previous several years. DIY approach to management consulting rarely works for major business transformations. To staunch the flow of the losses, initially, Rob enlisted in-house support. The internal business transformation experts tried for nearly 1 year to reduce costs and increase profits by tackling the business's cost base. The steps taken included firing some people within the business who were being redundant, as well as closing the plant and moving production to a low-cost country. As it turned out, the cost of transportation from the new manufacturing location to the customers more than nullified the savings from producing in a low-cost country. Sometimes, asking the audience is a waste of time. The health and safety problems in the new manufacturing location started taking up so much management time that they had to hire additional people to monitor the quality and safety standards. The final analysis revealed that closing the plant and moving the production to the low-cost country was a net cost-increasing move, which they did not know at the time. To be fair, many of the steps the internal team took were right. But they could not bring a number of them to closure where they could reap the reward of the ideas. On top of it, their missteps outweighed the steps in the right direction. There is a big difference between the business as usual, BAU, skill sets, and the business transformation, BT, skill sets. Read this blog Why Supply Chain Business Transformations, BT, Jobs Differ from Supply Chain Business as Usual, BAU, Jobs to get our perspective on the topic. That is also the reason why hiring a fresh bow person with successful track record rarely works for business transformations. Noticing that the tide kept growing higher despite all new efforts, Rob decided to call one of his best friends who had been a senior executive in a similar company for many years before being made redundant and had opened up a small one-person consulting operation afterwards. Asking a friend works only if your friend is a world-class expert in the subject matter. A number of executives, on retirement or being made redundant, resort to management consulting. Nothing wrong with that, they have an expertise, and there is a market for that expertise. Anybody who hangs a shingle with their name has something useful to sell. You just have to make sure you know exactly what they are selling. The problem arises when they overestimate their expertise. In their careers as an executives, they have worked on a project or two alongside a McKinsey or BCG team and observed them in action. That gives them the false confidence that there is nothing much to the scientific method and report writing, skills learned by deep diving over at least 18 months under the mentorship of an experienced strategist. That is similar to sitting in a cockpit alongside a pilot and believing that next time you can fly the plane. Rob had placed an enormous amount of trust in this friend. His friend worked in Rob's best interest, as he cared a lot about making Rob look good. Yet, without doing much analysis, this person came in and was able to convince Rob that he had gotten to the root of the problem after some one-on-one management interviews. In his view, how performance was being measured and how people were being rewarded was the problem. After all, he had seen this gambit work a number of times in the past. Reward people better and they pull out all stops to justify the rewards. He introduced a few additional performance measures and, at the same time, created and ran several highly expensive workshops with the management team. He thought the issue must be resolved after these steps. However, this friend lacked scientific method, consulting sophistication, and deep expertise in going within companies caught in a negative cycle, to correctly diagnose their problems. His experience as a senior executive was only handy for surface analysis and managing reasonably well-running operations, which is very different than stabilizing a declining operation. This experience was less than adequate for strategic analysis of businesses that needed massive transformations. It will be accurate to say that his diagnostic was almost entirely incorrect. The surface changes that Rob's friend made in performance measures did not result in any significant change in the business's profitability. The changes in business conditions had happened so gradually and imperceptibly that only a scientific method would detect the market changes and accurately measure them. His friend had now been trying to turn around the business for more than 18 months when one fine day, Rob got convinced that his friend would not be able actually to turn the company around. When the penny dropped, Rob understood that he needed professional intervention from a consulting company with deep expertise, high-level skills, and business transformations capability. Large-scale professional consulting world is divided 50-50 among top-tier strategists and second-tier large accounting/IT firms. Rob asked his TUIC to find a professional company for this very purpose. His TUIC scanned the market and found 5 or 6 top-tier strategy consulting companies who were more than capable of doing the job, each of them with a very high reputation. At the same time, there were also about 4 or 5 substantial professional services companies with hundreds